Welcome back to another THI podcast here on TarHeelIllustrated.com. I'm THI publisher Andrew Jones. Joining me, longtime college basketball, AAU, and high school coach, and the greatest film review creator in the history of the Western Hemisphere, Mr. David Sisk. And it's been a while. People have been asking for us to do one of these. Full disclosure, the last 7 weeks of my professional life have been the busiest I've ever had. I basically didn't have Christmas. I didn't wrap any gifts this year, David. It's just been crazy with the coaching change, with basketball, the portal, Belichick, and all this hires. So you and I've texted you a couple of times, hey, let's do one this week. And it's my fault we haven't done one because I've been so swamped. But I have carved out the time. You have carved out the time simultaneously, and we are here to discuss Carolina basketball. We're going to go as long as we go. It'll be a rather organic conversation. I've been dying to pick David's brain about some of these topics, and I will do that here in this episode. Before I go any further, quick reminder, Jacob Turner and I have decided that we are pushing for 20,000 subscribers on our YouTube channel. We're at about 18,000, about 18.3 right now. We want to get to 20,000 before the end of the season. And if we do, someone who subscribes starting from the other day to when we get 20,000, we'll win a free 1-year subscription to THI. But here's the kicker. If we get it by February 28th, someone's going to win 2 free years to THI. So go ahead and subscribe to our channel if you have not done so and get yourself in that circle so we can perhaps choose your name and get 2 free years. We'll get there by February 28th, no doubt, especially with the Tar Heels playing well. People tend to click the videos a little bit more often. And if they continue to play well, then I think 20,000 by February 28th will not be an issue. Also, make sure that you like every one of our videos because we need you to like every one of our videos. It's good for us. It's good for business. And that means we continue to keep guys like David Sisk around because he is a high-priced talent that we need to keep on board. All right, David, now that I've lathered you up enough, before I even give my take on anything, in the last 9 days, since the Tar Heels took the court at South Bend at 8-6 and the season teetering on the edge, what have you seen from this team in these 3 games that gives you the belief that perhaps the nose is finally turned in the right direction?
Does this mean you're going to quit paying me in crystals and to go to Big Macs?
Well, I did send you a couple of those old McDonald's gift certificates from games, but they don't take them anymore.
Well, we'll find something.
Well, very quickly, some of the people who listen remember who the late Tucker McLaughlin, one of the greatest people in the history of the planet, who was a longtime sports writer. Tucker one time, because I drove him to South Bend, he gave me 4 Exxon gas carts. 3 of them had nothing on them. And one of them, he had chewed on the end of it. So you could see teeth marks from Tucker. If you know Tucker, you know what I'm talking about. And I just said one of the funniest things you've heard in a while. But anyway, I digress. Please continue.
Well, I was going to say right quick, and then you'll have to remind me what we were talking about. I remember this time last year, really, you were talking about Jacob wanting to really push the YouTube side. Yeah. And at that time, you were fighting to try to get to 10.
So no, that was a couple of years ago.
Doubled in a year.
Yeah, that was a couple of years ago. But yeah, Jacob's big on the Jacob understands that stuff a lot better than I do. And we were doing our football show earlier in the week when it kind of came up to us during the show. Hey, let's push for 20 right now because we want to get to 20 and we want to get to 30. We want to get to 40. And so Jacob's really big on, he looks at the numbers on the YouTube channel a lot more than I do. I don't have time, but it's more present on his mind. That's kind of his baby. He's more involved with the YouTube channel and that side of things than anything else on the site. So Jacob will be very excited that we're just talking about him right now because he loves the notoriety.
It's good they're talking
about got that because he's not getting the shekels because there aren't many of those to go around. If we get to 20,000 subscribers, there'll be more shekels to go around.
I hear you. Now, what did we bring up about North Carolina?
Well, we're here to talk about North Carolina basketball. How about that? No, so I was watching warm-ups in South Bend down the baseline, and I thought the team was really loose being 8-6. And the last question I had asked a player after the game at Louisville, I didn't really even ask RJ Davis a question. I just said, RJ, 8-6. And he puts his head down and he shakes. He's like, I know, man. I mean, it was like a sobering moment for a guy who's his fifth year there. He's now the number 2 all-time scorer. He played in the national championship game and all that. And there's no way on earth he envisioned 8-6 this year. And they were 8-6. And there were some things that occurred that I'll get into later after that game, the next couple of days, leading to South Bend. So when I'm on the baseline in South Bend watching them warm up, David, they were very loose. I was surprised. I thought they would be super tight. They were very loose. They've won 3 in a row. They've done a lot of things different in the last 3 games than they were up to that point, notably communicating on defense, rotating in help side defense, and the emergence of Jalen Washington playing like the guy they thought they had in the summer. So what have you seen in these last 3 games that give you the belief that it's very possible that this isn't just a 3-game stretch, but perhaps they have turned the nose in the right direction?
Well, I think the first thing, they've won 2 tough road games. And look, let's be honest right now. I wouldn't say North Carolina is a great team. No. You know, we're trending in the right direction. I don't know if they can become a great team. But you get into the ACC and you're playing teams. The ACC's down. So let's just get all this out of the way. But North Carolina State and Notre Dame, you know, going on the road and playing those 2 road games are tough to win, you know, in any league. Now, I do ask myself, looking at Notre Dame and North Carolina State, and say, well, they should win by more than what they're winning. But they could have lost both those games. So winning is in any, it's not easy. So any matrix to measure it by, a win is a win is a win. So that's the first thing. I think a couple of things that I noticed, even going back to North Carolina State and the Notre Dame game, I thought maybe there was a little bit improvement from in the North Carolina State game. I just felt like Notre Dame still, the energy was lacking. Notre Dame hung around. I don't think that energy in that arena is nowhere near what North Carolina faced in Raleigh on Saturday. I mean, that was a madhouse in there watching that game. And you know, you were there. I wasn't. But just watching it on TV, you could tell the rivalry and the hatred and bitterness and all that. But what I'm noticing, even in a close game in North Carolina State, there was a lot more energy. The big thing, I think, is the emergence of Ian Jackson. He's having his best stretch. If you go over the last 6, I think they're 7-2 in the last 9 games, 5-1 in the last 6, if I'm not mistaken. But if you go over those last 6 games, he's averaging 23 points a game. So now he's the number 1 option. And we spoke about it before we went on the air. He's doing it in a way that they really don't draw up plays for him per se as much. He's not necessarily an on-ball guy with his role that he's comfortable with. He's getting kicks, up penetration. You know, he can get to the rim, but he gets long rebounds. It's over. And we saw that yesterday. Things he can do on a break and just create a fast break when it's not there. He's as dynamic in the open floor as anybody in the country. And so that's impressive. So if you look at how he's being used, it's like you said, it's not being force-fed. He's not forcing it. It's under what they want to do, and then he can create things, and he's creating good opportunities. He's just not trying to do everything. If you look at North Carolina State, he and R.J. Davis took 28 of the 60 shots. Ian Jackson took 15. R.J. Davis took 13. So they took half the team's shots between them. I think that's about right. And I look defensively at what they've done. They're playing better there, although it helps when you're not playing Alabama and Auburn, teams like that, obviously, Florida, teams like that, obviously. Yeah. But the thing that I've noticed on the defensive end, I think Jalen Washington has really given them a good rim protection. You know, he's had to block shots, but he's really been long. And even before the North Carolina State game, he's been long around the rim. You know, when other teams, their guards get into the lane. And you saw it early on, North Carolina State game. They're around the rim and they can't make shots. He is offering rim protection. I think that's important. The other thing I noticed, it looks to me like the bench is being shortened. And as I pull up the numbers here from yesterday, I look and you had 7 players. Jalen Washington played 27. Drake Powell played 34. Ian played 32. Elliot Cadeau played 29. RJ 36. Seth Trimble played 25. So 6 players are playing 20 or more. Vin Lubin played 13. I really think it comes down between him and Jalen Washington. It can be back and forth. I think whoever they feel like is playing the best and has to feel for it that game is going to get more minutes. But you saw 6 players playing 20 or more, 7 players, and that 7th guy played 13. So he's shortening the bench up. He's trying to go with the best rotations, and he feels like I think Hubert did a good job of that. There were some times I felt like certain rotations, he had 3 guys on the court. I don't think you can have right now Cadeau, Trimble, and Lubin on the floor at the same time. You've got 3 non-scorers there. And that let North Carolina State take that lead back. But if you look at the very end, he had his best 4 players. He had Davis. He had Jackson. He had Powell. He had a combination of Cadeau and Trimble at the other perimeter spot, and then he had Jalen Washington. That was his best 5, and they closed the game out. So I think you start after a lot of tinkering, he's starting to get his feel on rotations and a lineup, a shorter lineup.
Yeah, I want to hit on those things that you brought up. Those are all good points and topics I wanted to discuss, and we'll go back to them separately. The first thing I want to get to is we'll go to Ian. Michael Coe, who's with Chapelboro, who's been around the UNC program for a while, was sitting next to me yesterday, and he described Ian as toolsy, Toolsy. It's a baseball term, and Michael is a big baseball guy, covers UNC baseball as well. And I thought that was really, really appropriate because, Ian is not pounding the ball on the floor as much as he used to. Mm-hmm. He's playing more in the natural flow with the team. I said after South Bend, I thought that was the first time the other guys appeared comfortable and connected with the way Ian plays. And then after SMU, I said I thought that was the first time that Ian was super connected with the way they play. So they had kind of merged together. So we don't see him pounding it on the floor and just driving into traffic. And as a result, he's not shooting as many free throws, which isn't the worst thing in the world because I think the quality of his shot has been better. But he is toolsy in how he could score from so many different ways, and that's something that's going to be there the rest of the way. Hubert's not going to pull him out of the lineup. He's not going to not start him. Ian's going to get 34, 35 minutes a night, and he should because he's the best scorer on this team, even better than RJ, and he's proven that. But the thing that really has stood out to me, and I want to get your take on this because you've seen kids develop. You've coached NBA guys, a ton of major college guys. When scorers are learning to play with others instead of just being the scorer. To me, this past week was such a definitive week for Ian's growth as a player. He didn't score until 1:32 left in the first half against SMU. Finished with 18, had 15 in the second half. He didn't score until 2:50 left in the first half against State. Finished with 21, had 15 in the second half, had 4 threes in the second half, including one when they were down 59-58 after they had allowed a 9-0 run. And really looked like they were screwing the game away like they did at Louisville, like they did against Florida, et cetera. And Ian hits a big 3. And he said after the game, he wasn't thinking the moment, he was just playing ball. I mean, he was asked about the importance of the shot, and he almost looked surprised that it was an important shot. To him, it was just playing ball. Part of that's being a freshman. Part of that's just being Ian. So what is your take on a guy who isn't suddenly forcing stuff and pounding it on the floor so much, and he's still getting his points, and he's doing it playing off his teammates while they also play with him?
Well, he's 42 of 88, if my number. I'm trying to add them up here on the fly as we speak. The last 6 games, and that's what we're looking at. And that's been his best stretch, starting with UCLA. So you're talking about 88 shots in 6 games. So you're looking at roughly almost 15 shots a game.
Yeah.
And 15 was what he had yesterday. And in each game, he has made at least 2 3-pointers. So he made 5 yesterday, believe it or not. So, so if you look at him yesterday, he's 5 of 8 from 3. He's 3 for 7 from 2. So if you look, a couple of those twos, I think maybe 2 of them were fast breaks, like he created either off a turnover or a long rebound, and he finishes. The thing I've noticed about him, and let me throw one other thing too now, he's not a distributor. He's had 6 assists in 6 games. So he scored 88 points. He's had 6 assists.
Yeah, and by the way, he had 3 on the season before the 6-game stretch. Yeah. So UCLA that day in the Madison Square Garden, when this stretch started, he got his 4th assist on the season that day. So he is getting rid of the ball a little bit more of late. It's not a volume, but we've seen signs of him not getting the ball and having it stick with him. He's learning. I know I'm diving in here on you. He's learning that he can get rid of the ball on a half court, and the ball can still find him again and find him in position to score.
And I think that's one thing you have to learn. You progress as you go through a freshman. But like I said, the thing is, they're not running a ton of stuff for him in a half court. The thing that I saw yesterday are their guards who have the ability to get in the paint and find him. We saw Seth Trimble do it a couple of times. We saw get into the paint, drive, kick opposite. Elliot Cadeau, God knows the stuff he sees when he passes a basketball. He is so good at getting into the paint and kicking, but just making these skip passes across, just flicking it. It's unbelievable. And then obviously RJ can do it too. So you've got all 3 guards can do that. So that's what I saw yesterday is basically where he's off the ball and he's getting these kicks or he's scoring on a break. It's not like they're designing this play for him and saying, go. Now, let me tell you, he can get it and spread out and take you one-on-one, and he does some of that. But the thing that I noticed earlier, and I agree, I'm in agreement with you, I don't think you realize what a good shot was and what it wasn't. You either shot the 3 off the ball or you went all the way to the rim. And a lot of times he was going into these early on, these big bodies like Omarui from Alabama and Broom from Auburn and Florida. You're not going to find a bigger team in the country across the board than the Gators. So he's going into the team for that and taking bad shots. And now you're starting to see the flow. But he's a freshman. So that comes, and I think that's the big thing. These are not things you learn on the fly as a senior. These are things that you learn on the fly as a freshman. So I see him playing within himself, within the confines of the offense. But I think, like you said, they're playing well with him too. And now we're seeing a little bit of a blend.
Yeah, I'm in talking to him after games too. He's absurdly confident. And I say that in very much a positive way. He's got New York confidence. He's got he was
part of the Jelly fam in high school.
Yeah, well, there you go.
So that tells you if you're part of the Jelly fam, you're going to have confidence.
I asked him after the Campbell game, which is he had that 4-game stretch of 23 or more points. That was the second game. And I asked him about growing confidence, and he looked at me like I had horns growing out of my head. Like, dude, I've always had the confidence. It's just more playing time. That's what he said. I'm on the court. It's more court time, so I'm doing more stuff. It's never – you got to be careful when you ask him questions because he's going to go the obvious. You have to understand that Ian is not going to say, I'm learning how to do this or that, except he did acknowledge yesterday that he's trusting his teammates more, and that's part of the ball coming back to him. He gets rid of it, it's going to come back to him, and that's not just him no longer pounding the ball on the floor. It's everybody. They went through that long period where offensively they were horrid to watch, even though they may have been scoring points, but they weren't doing it in a way that should be pleasing to any basketball eye, where they were just pounding on the floor and guys were driving into traffic. We saw Elliot go through that stretch. RJ went through that stretch. Seth did to a lesser extent. He's always been he's always deferred, and Ian was doing it. Now they're not doing it that much, and I think though his trust of teammates, knowing the ball's going to find him again, makes them better because they're not worried about it. They just play. And Ian has this sneaky ability to get open, to find spots and be open and make himself available without getting additional attention from opponents. And that's what I saw yesterday. Those threes he hit, he made himself available. Each time someone went in the lane and they kicked it out, Ian was an easy pass to connect to because he made himself open all the time.
Yeah, if you watch them, they slide well without the ball.
Yeah.
And Elliott's so good. Elliott could throw it through a pinhole. But, they're so good. They're good at sliding off the ball. So if a guy penetrates, they slide wing to corner or they slide corner to wing. So if my guy who's in help turns to look to the ball, he automatically is thinking, okay, I'm going to close back. I know where my guy's at. I'm going to close to that spot. Well, you turn to look and he's not there. He's what we call is replaced himself. So, and move. So, and understanding too, and doing it, you get as far away from the help side defender as possible. So, that's really good. Now, I'm going to say this about the makeup. He's on a team that really allows him to do that. And if he's somewhere where you've got 5 guys who are all bulk shooters and bulk scorers, it doesn't work as easily. I was talking with a guy this week, and I don't even remember which team. It may have even been about a high school team. But you talk about having a number of scores, it's almost like you delegate it, and there's never a flow because you're like, well, Andrew got his 2 shots. Now it's my time to get 2 shots now. And then Jacob will get his 2 shots. And you start doing all that, and it's by committee, and there never is the flow. If you look at where they're at right now, Elliott's not going to force shots. Seth Trimble doesn't force shots. RJ will get his. Drake Powell is a guy who's tremendously under control. He does not want to get outside. You can tell of what Hubert Davis wants him to do. I think he's really being the ultimate kind of team player with the way he fits. And then obviously there's not going to be a ton of shots inside. So he's in a place, talking about Ian Jackson, he's in a place to where he can be allowed to shoot the ball and get some shots. And it's not like he just becomes this vacuum or a black hole where everything's going there. He can get his shots, and he may take twice as many shots as the third guy as far as attempts go, but he's not playing outside the offense. So, like I said, I think the shorter lineup, the mix of scorers, the mix of facilitators, the mix of players who play within the system, and they'll take a shot when they're open. I think it has a chance of gelling together. It's still got a way to go because, like I said, they didn't score a ton of points yesterday. First half was rough. Second half, both teams, North Carolina and North Carolina State, started to get it going. There wasn't a lot of points scored against Notre Dame. Now, this thing may happen just simply because you don't have enough bulk scores around. Yeah. And this may be something that we deal with throughout the year. But I see it where they're fitting. Now, as it comes together and they start to win, I think the next step you want to see with these teams is you're not going down to the buzzer. When they play out Cal and Stanford, I know they're going to be home, but you don't want to go down to the buzzer with these teams. And I think they play better at home than they do on the road. Yeah. But when you go to some of these places in the ACC and you're the better team, let's see you pull away and distance yourself and quit going down to the wire.
Yeah, Hubert noted that yesterday that when I asked him about J-Wash stepping up and making plays, he said, well, we really shouldn't have been in that situation, and he's right. And I'm going to go back to Ian in a second, but they had a chance early in the game to build a cushion. They didn't do it. They had 2 chances in the second half to pull away, and they didn't put foot on throat. So they're going to have to learn how to put foot on throat, especially on the road. One last thing about Ian. You mentioned about getting as far from the help side defense as possible. His head coach is one of the top 3-point shooters in the history of the NBA. Another assistant coach, the associate head coach, is one of the best 3-point shooters in Carolina history. Another assistant coach, Marcus Page, was the all-time leader in 3-pointers made at Carolina until RJ passed him by a couple of weeks ago. Oh, and he's playing with RJ. He's got a lot of people there to teach him about the art of being open.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter how great a shooter you are. If you're shooting contested shots, you're not going to shoot a high percentage. But if you can get yourself 10% more open, it's an easier shot. It's a more makeable shot. And I think we're seeing the art of Ian learning how to get himself more open without having to work super hard. He's getting points without having to go grind it on the ground, putting the ball on the floor like he was a couple of weeks ago. The art of teaching a kid how to get a little bit more open on the perimeter. What's that like as a coach, and how have you seen that evolve with him in recent weeks?
Well, he's gone. You got to think, when he played high school in AAU, he was on ball. I mean, he was the guy. He was the one option. He was an on-ball guard. It was always in his hands. Well, he goes to North Carolina, and he's off-ball. So he's never been off-ball. So that's a switch. That's a big switch, huge switch. He's never had to try to get open off the ball. And like I said, they're not running set plays for him to get him open off of it. You've got to read. You've got to make decisions. You've got to know how to play without it. And he's got all those people around him, like you said, that can teach him how to do that. And now you're starting to see that. And you can see that his shots, and you hinted to it right off the bat, he's so much comfortable doing that.
Yeah.
So now, a lot of people might look at him and say, all right, we see Ian, and we're looking at NBA draft projections. It's obviously he's one of the top freshmen in the country. He's dynamic. Why is he around 20 to 25th in draft projections, and maybe he's not lottery right now? And I think the whole thing is he's not – I'm trying to want to phrase this right. I don't think he's really a smooth facilitator, playmaker, I guess would be the term, a smooth playmaker on the ball.
Yeah.
If Ian Jackson gets the ball, it's score first, score second, score third if he's on the ball. I don't think you could run him at point guard and move Cadeau and R.J. Davis off the ball and all these guys off the ball, and your offense goes smoothly. He doesn't have that in. So I think what they're looking at, maybe as we get into the league, now this can progress, but right now he's going to have the ball in his hands in the NBA. But I think right now what he's doing, like I said, is more off the ball. So I still see it when it is in his hands. His decision-making, his ability to be able to facilitate has to come. It has to come to be a good shot. I mean, if you look at R.J. Davis when he's clicking, he's 3-level. You know, he's deep, he's mid-level. He struggled deep this year. But at his best, he's a deep shooter. He's mid-level. He's at the rim. And I don't know that I look at in the half court, Ian Jackson, even though he's looking score first, he's not that 3-level scorer yet, and he's not that facilitator. So he's playing to his strengths right now. And as he does that, and as he gets more comfortable, let's see if his game, what he's able to do well, see if it expands. Because I think that's the thrilling thing for North Carolina is that if you look, can R.J. Davis get better? Yeah, R.J. Davis is shooting. His numbers are the lowest of his career. He still averages 17 a game. He can get better. Can Jalen Washington get better than Lubin? Absolutely. Can Trimble get better? Yes. Can Cadeau get better? Yes. I don't think any of the players have really peaked, but these freshmen can expand their game so much between now and March that I think this team is best basketball should be in front of them.
I think it's going to be interesting to see how long it takes Trimble to get back to 100%. Last year, he suffered a concussion, and it took him a month. And he only missed 2 games. Here, he missed a lot more time. And he admitted yesterday after the game, he acknowledged that, it's thrown him off some. It was big that he scored a couple of times around the rim yesterday because he went a game and a half without scoring. But I also saw a little bit more of his defense coming back yesterday. So when he gets back to being completely having the cord cut to the effects of the concussion, and he becomes that guy who's a 13-point, 14-point guy who could defend like crazy, that's just another dynamic. I think he's probably going to come off the bench maybe for the rest of the year because Hubert's not going to mess with anything right now. Yeah. I think Seth is mature enough He's front of the jersey enough to handle it as much as he wants to start, and he's going to play starters minutes, like played 26 and 25 this week, so those are starters minutes for the most part at North Carolina. I think he's an X factor as well because we haven't seen him be who he is since the UCLA game. And while he's been out, Ian's gotten better. The light has gone on a little bit for Jay Wash. We've seen RJ become more of a leader. The hand clapping, the chatting, the vocal RJ has suddenly emerged in year 5, almost midway through year 5. And I think Elliot Cadeau has worked through the funk. I think he's through it. I think the way he played yesterday was the guy we thought we would see all year long, eyes in the back of his head. Elliott, we saw that, and we saw some snippets of it against Notre Dame. And, of course, he had the huge play to win the Notre Dame game. So when Seth does become 100% Seth, he's going to rejoin a better group. I know he's on the floor now, but when I say when that guy's finally there, he's going to mesh in with a better group across the board and also a more confident team because winning – even when you should win by more than 2 or by 1 at Notre Dame like they did, winning is winning. You start piling that stuff together, it could give you a tremendous amount of confidence. And at some point, those are 10-point wins and 12-point wins. And when Seth is that guy, David, that gives them 6, 7 really good college players that Hubert can go to war with just about anybody.
Yeah, and now I want to start by saying this. I know you said him getting back to 13 or 14 points, Seth Trimble. I don't think we're going to see that.
Well, he doesn't need to now.
No, he doesn't.
They needed him to score more before, and Ian wasn't playing as much. Now, I think if Seth's not worried about scoring 13 or 14, there's going to be a higher efficiency with his game, and he could just go balls out on defense.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say. He doesn't have to, but it's not the same team. If you look early, Seth Trimble was one of the biggest surprises in the country. I know that talking with people that know basketball that are not North Carolina people but live other places in the country and keep up with it and watch it, one of the things that they said when they're watching North Carolina early in the year, against these really good teams, so everything's a national, the ESPN game of the night, again, in that tough schedule. And they were saying, we didn't realize that Seth Trimble had this in his game, that he had improved this much and had gotten this good. But he, at that time, they needed him to do some of that. But now, as your freshman, particularly in Jackson, has progressed his game, on the offensive end, they don't need him to do that, really, I don't think. But the other thing is, too, and this is an elephant in the room, just watching him yesterday, I am curious how much of it he was starting. Now he's not. Maybe he was not going to get the number of shots. Maybe he's not a high of an option offensively as he was. How does he fit into that with a better team? Does it hurt his confidence? Because you were talking about confidence level, that Ian Jackson didn't need it, but Seth Trimble made, that may be something that he fights. Certain players do that. So is he going to have the confidence level that he had the first of the year coming back in an offensive role that may be reduced a little bit? And like we said, not starting.
I think the confidence also, the question in confidence with him comes from the fact that just a year ago he went through this. He had a concussion last year, and it took him a month. He missed the Clemson and Miami games, Clemson at home, Miami on the road. And when he came back, it was the game at Duke a month later, which is when we actually saw him start to play like he was before the concussion, and actually a little bit better. He had a really good game that night. Now he knows that, and you know how athletes are.
Yeah.
When they go through it again, he knows. And he spoke pretty – I'll give him credit. He's probably the most transparent player on the team. When I say that, he doesn't really hold back. He was the one calling out their defensive effort in Hawaii. He called it out when he got back from Hawaii. And I appreciate that because someone on that team needs to talk. It's such a quiet team. He was trying to do the talking, and all of a sudden he gets a concussion. I think it's hard for him to assume that role right now. So he's got a few things he's dealing with. A, he's trying to feel better and trying to get into full basketball shape in his mind and body. 2, he just went through this a year ago, so it's so fresh. that sometimes athletes will convince themselves it's going to take that long. And I don't think he can afford to wait a month because they need to mesh here pretty soon with who they're going to be because they got a 3-game stretch coming up at Pitt, at Duke, home against Pitt. They've got to find a way to win one of those games at least for their resume. And the other thing is, it is a different role now. So he has to adjust to a different role. I think Seth, like I said before, is enough of this guy. He could have gone somewhere else and played a ton of minutes and gotten shots. He came back because this is very important to him. I think he'll adapt. But the question is, how long does it take for him to become 100% Seth again and in an altered role? That might take a little bit longer, David, because I think what you saw yesterday was a guy, and we saw it the other night, a guy who didn't look the same offensively. It looked like something was off because he's still dealing with some of the hangover effect of the concussion, which for some guys can last a long time. There was a football player Carolina just got in the portal from UConn who had a concussion and missed 5 games.
Yeah.
That's a long time to be out. So for Seth, he even said yesterday, maybe I came back too soon. So he knows it and he's thinking it. So how long do they get to the point where he's no longer thinking that? Then I think you'll see a different Seth.
Well, and one thing, I think as I pull up schedule here, I think that they've got an opportunity to kind of get him right because I'm going to be honest with you. I think Stanford and Cal are, you've got 2 games at home. Watching a little bit of them, if North Carolina has any trouble with either one of those teams, I'll be surprised.
Yeah.
But then you've got Wake Forest on the road. To me, that's the one you circle.
Yeah.
That's the next big one, and that's one of the ones you circled on the year. I had right now pretty well a match on the schedule, pretty close to what they have right now. I thought Louisville would be the toughest game. I thought they would win the rest of them up to where they are, and probably the most decisive game I thought they might have a chance to lose. Going into Duke on February 1st was the game at Wake Forest. So he's got 9 days basically from North Carolina as well. 10 days from the 11th to the 21st to recoup and try to improve. So they're going to be practicing every day. So he should get, to feeling better. Just each day, hopefully he's better. You go through practices. That's a very important thing. You don't have to get off campus, so you don't have to travel. I would not want to have to, my ears stop up on a plane so bad. I would hate to fly with concussion symptoms. I would.
And he traveled. He was with them on the road.
Yeah. So he's going to be in his own bed. He's going to be home. They don't have to leave. So, hopefully the next 10 days, as far as health issues go and comfortability, just getting back into that flow of it. He's got the balls in his court right there, and he's been down a pretty good hand as far as that goes for the next week and a half.
Yeah. Cal's really fallen apart here the last month. And if you can neutralize Renault, you should have no problem beating Stanford. That'll be a good test for Jay Wash. I do want to talk about Jalen Washington, but I want to go to Drake Powell because you mentioned him, and he gets kind of overlooked.
Yeah.
But there is not one thing he doesn't do at a fairly decent level. And the thing I love the most about his game is how aware and alert he is. Every defensive rebound he gets, half the time he's looking up court before he hits the ground. And he looks to push and he sees guys. And he's showing lately he can match that 3 with the drive. He can score in transition. He does it. The ball doesn't stick with him. He gets rid of it. He may not get an assist, but he's part of possessions with good ball movement that ends up with an assist and a basket. What are your thoughts about him as a freshman being a glue guy, but also a guy who can dip his hands into all the statistical baskets?
Yeah, he does, like you say, he does a little bit of everything. Now, he had 2 games. He had his best offensive game. Well, actually, Michigan State was his best earlier in the year. He had 18 points on 9 shots. He had 17 against SMU. went 6 of 13 from the field, 4 of 6 and 3. And then in this about the last 5 games, he had 14 against Louisville, 6 for 11. He had 12 against Campbell. He only shot it 5 times, missed 1 shot. 2 of them were threes. So he's efficient offensively. Like I said, you see nothing forced out of him, so that's good. And a tremendous defender. In the last 5 games, you're looking at 23 rebounds, so over 4 rebounds per game. Like I said, you see a defender, you see a ball handler, you see a guy who's a very good passer on a break, very good passer in transition, can get out and run. And I'm going to tell you what, and I'd be remiss, because to me, this is the most important thing. Let's go back to early in the year, and let's talk about the holes that were perceived with this North Carolina team, and they were. And that is too small, no rim protection inside. It's a small team, and you have a small team that's not shooting the three-pointer very well.
Yeah.
Okay? That was the book on North Carolina. Well, when Powell and Jackson both hit the starting lineup, all of a sudden, and this is not a knock on Seth Trimble. This is why I feel like one reason he does need to come off the bench. When you have Trimble, Cadeau, and Davis, you have one of the smallest backcourts in all of college basketball. And that's an issue. They can't switch defensively. They can get put in mismatches.
Although they do all the time, and they find themselves often in those mismatches.
You can't, for them, you can shoot over them. They have trouble shooting over bigger perimeters. So, and even though you still have 2 guys, and it's no fault of their own, you can't stretch them. But now, when you have Jackson and Powell, and maybe they're a little smaller at the 4, but Powell plays bigger in his size because he's so long. And I've always kind of, when I looked at him, I went, he's a 3, but he's a guy who can play 4 too, and I think play it very well in college basketball. If you look at them now, if you take the average size, the average height, by moving Powell to a 4, it may kind of be this. There may not be that much difference if you say across the board and say, well, this team's average height's 6'5" or whatever. But if you really look at it from a basketball standpoint, it is a bigger team because they're bigger at the 3 spot. And now, and the way they play, you've got 4 perimeters around one post anyway. So now you've got 2 perimeters on the floor that are at least 6'6". And I think that's important. I think, and with a rim protection that Jalen Washington's given, I think the big negatives that you said about this team, just so far from a roster maintenance makeup, now you can't say it as much. Now, they're going to get some lineups on the floor that they do go back to being small when those 3 get in at the same time. But when you've got those 4 or a combination, you slip somebody else at the 4, you play Powell at the 3, or Jackson plays the 3 and Withers plays the 4. Powell plays the 3, Withers plays the 4. You've got, and Jalen didn't play a whole lot, but you've got that mix now. You've got a bigger team, and I think that's important.
Yeah, and to that, that's a great point, and I want to add to it because Hubert has spent so much time trying to figure out what the hell to do with the 4 and the 5 in particular. He hasn't really had the luxury to move his pieces in a way that can either match or force other teams to match them. What we've seen in the last couple of games, I know Jay Witt only played 4 minutes yesterday, and he did not play in the second half, but all 4 minutes were at the 4, not the 5. And when he was at the 4, I think all 4 of those minutes, Drake Powell was at the 3.
Yeah.
And Cade Tyson's had 2 DNPs, but last week in South Bend, Cade Tyson played as much at the 3 as he did the 4. When he was on the floor, you had Tyson as a 6'7" at the 3. You had Jay Witt at 6'9" at the 4, and you had Washington at 6'10" at the 5. Suddenly they're a normal-looking team.
Yeah.
So they do have – if Hubert can count on performances going in, he can then start to be big every once in a while and eliminate that as an issue more than it has been in previously. And Drake Powell at the three there are a lot of guys that he could guard every three in the country.
Yeah.
And there are not a whole lot of threes that can guard him because of his length, his ability to play bigger, and because he's constantly got his head up. He sees everything on the floor. He's such an alert. I have not seen a whole lot of freshmen, David, who have such an IQ and an alertness and awareness and a connectivity to everything that's going on as I do Drake Powell. He doesn't have to post a ton of stats to have a fantastic game. And that's another important development of this team because they didn't have that guy in November. They didn't have anybody handling that role in November. Now they do.
Drake Powell was a 5-star, as everybody knows, out of high school. He was in everybody's top 10 to top 15. And I'm talking about all three, whether your rivals, 247 on 3, ESPN, whoever. He was across the board. And it was never based on really what he did with the ball in his hands. Now, people did want to see how well could he shoot the outside shot. So when he shot the three well at Peach Jam as a 17, and then he had really good shooting numbers last year with Northwood last season, that really helped. But that didn't boost his rating. It was already there. And it was based on his athleticism. It was based on how well he defended. It was based on his overall skill differential and that he was a Swiss Army knife.
Yeah.
And that's what he is. So he brings that, like you say, a guy who could do everything out there on the court. Harrison Ingram had some of that.
Yeah.
He impacted the game in so many different ways. I can't think, our transfer out of Notre Dame last year.
Oh, Cormac Ryan.
Cormac Ryan had some of that in him.
Yeah.
So you take these, they're going to have some games where they score, where they make shots, and that's good, but it's not like you look at Drake Powell and you say, if he doesn't make shots, he can't help us.
No.
Those words will never come out of your mouth because he helps the team in various ways.
The first thing offensively that stood out to me about him, and I talked about this in early November, is that he never got in the way. The ball didn't stick with him. He didn't get in the way. He allows his presence on the court doesn't adversely affect anybody else. Sometimes a guy can get out there and he plays outside. He can affect other people in a negative way. Drake has never done that. He has, I wouldn't say seamlessly, but almost seamlessly fit in. When Hubert put him in the starting lineup, I wondered if it was the right move. And Hubert perhaps saw down the road, his staff saw down the road, look, we just need to throw him out there.
I think you had to.
But they weren't very good. So if you were you might as well get your most talented players on the team, more minutes. And he struggled the first several games as a starter, but the last 5 or so, he has been a big time player. And, he's in those first round mocks as well.
Yeah.
And in some of them, he's ahead of Ian. And maybe it's because he looks like a guy who could be plug and play and help a team win for the very same reasons he's helping this team.
Exactly. And that's what I was going to say. He is projected on NBA exactly like he was projected out of high school going into college. And we talked about what Ian's role was. Ian going from on the ball to off the ball. But Drake Powell's advantage is, now, was he the dude at Northwood? Yes. Was he the dude with CP3? But you never, ever saw the ball in his hands as much where they were just saying, give him the ball, get everybody out of the way. He's going to take 40 shots like you did with a lot of these other players. So what you're doing to a certain degree at North Carolina is what he did with these other places because he was really good at just playing within the concept. So, and like I said, you add him, you put him in, the team gets bigger. But when you bring 5 stars for the purpose of recruiting, you got to play these guys.
Yeah.
And it so worked out because if they would have been good or really, really good early, then you're kind of stuck and you're saying, okay, how do we kind of work this? And you can't, these players and their inner circles and their camps, they watch how these guys are used. So like I said, if you get a 5-star in and he just sits over there, it takes notice and word gets out and you hurt yourself. But you've got Jackson playing a lot. You've got Powell playing a lot of minutes. So Elliot Cadeau last year as a freshman. So you're Hubert Davis. You can go to these recruits and say, look, we will play you as a freshman and you're going to have a big role. And, and if you do what you're supposed to do, playing 30, 35 minutes a game, it's there. And the big thing, too, and it's hurt Hubert in the past, can players look at Hubert Davis and say he produces pros? Right now, they can't. They can look at other guys, other coaches out there who are putting players in lottery situations and really first-round situations. Second round doesn't resonate. Can you take guys and get them drafted in the first round? And I think it would really be great for North Carolina if Drake and Ian could both fall in that first round where they could be drafted. I think it helps Hubert Davis and it helps recruiting immensely down the road from what recruits, and like I said, their inner circles, their handlers, their advisors, their agents, and family members, what they're looking for.
Ian will be in that draft this year. I'm not convinced yet that Drake will go this year.
Well, Drake's going to be close. He needs to slide. It would really be good obviously for him, but it would be very, very good for Hubert Davis if he could slide into that.
Yeah, and as far as Drake, I was having a conversation with someone about this yesterday, is that he comes from a situation where I think that they might lean on patience because it's one thing to get to the league, but how about get the league so you can stay in the league? So another year in college might be viewed that way for him. Before we continue on, this is a great spot to remind everybody that we are looking for sponsors here at Tar Heel Illustrated so I can pay these guys what they're worth so we can pay our travel, and we are a business. If you are a Carolina Tar Heel fan, you love the Tar Heels, you love our work, and you want to be associated with us, let us know at thimedia@yahoo.com is our email. Send us an email. I'll be the one that responds. We are looking for sponsors, looking for advertisers to be a part of what we do, not just on these podcasts, because right now is a spot in the show like with David Siss that I would be talking about your business. But we have all kinds of room on our site, on Twitter, on our Facebook page, and of course on all of these videos that we do. Is if you're a regular consumer of our stuff, we do a ton of them. But you won't just be someone who we just run an ad on. You'll become a part of us. We want you as a passionate Tar Heel fan to join forces with us. You could be a little bit of an insider too. I'll throw you some tidbits off the record. And who knows, if you know how to talk and you have a pretty face like David and me, we may even stick you on one of these podcasts every once in a while to talk about your business and give us your 2 cents about the Tar Heels. So thimedia@yahoo.com. Send me an email. I will get back to you soon, and we can discuss bringing you on board. Okay, David, Jalen Washington, the most important conversation I've had with a Carolina basketball player this year was right out in front of their locker room in South Bend last week when he had 5 blocks in the game. And mind you, going into that game, he had 9 on the season. He had 5 in that game. He had 2 in the previous 7 games. 5 that game. He remember he tied up Marcus Burton in the lane. He even did it against State Saturday, where a couple times guys didn't shoot the ball, didn't attack the rim, whereas they were attacking it without any worry the first 13 games of the season, 14 games. Now they're thinking more about him. He said Hubert Davis was emphatic with like 1,000 exclamation marks after the Louisville game because they were pitiful defending the lane against Louisville, defending the rim. But he was adamant about rotating defensively, about communicating those rotations, providing help side defense. And he kind of said in simple terms, well, you can't block the shot if you're not there. But if you're there, you can affect shots. It was a very simple thing, but sometimes for players, it's not as simple as it seems to us watching from a distance. Since then, he's had 12 block shots. I actually think he's had 16 or 17. I'm still perplexed at some of the scorekeeping from the game Saturday, but he's altered a lot more. He's forced dribblers out of the lane just by virtue of being in there. How massive is it for North Carolina? If the Jalen Washington we've saw at South Bend and the other day, yesterday, and also even SMU, he played 15 minutes, had 4 blocked shots, 3 assists, showing he's aware and alert on both ends of the floor. How huge is it for this team if that's the guy they have moving forward?
Well, it means everything because the first game that I really saw where I saw this, and we've talked about just a while ago, we said this team is the gripe was this team, it's too small. It doesn't have rim protection. They don't have a guy like Bacot anymore, and Jalen Washington, out of no fault of his own, was really held to a high standard and probably got some criticism early on, that he didn't deserve. But I saw it against Notre Dame. He offered a lot of rim protection and just around the rim, just staying in the front. And I noticed it down the stretch. He played 23 minutes. And like you say, the 5 blocked shots were big. He had 8 points, 6 rebounds, 5 blocked shots in 3 minutes. In 23 minutes, he only shot the ball 3 times. So his importance to this team might not be the way you gauge it with a lot of other players. What he needs to do, if he scores some, great, but rebound, but block shots, but force guys to miss. And if you looked at Notre Dame, a lot of times late in that game, those guards were getting to the rim and they couldn't finish. They were just parking him in front of the basket and saying, score over me. So if they went into a ball screen, he was staying back. If his guy stepped out, he was staying back, and they were just putting him there. And they said, if anybody comes in here to the rim, you adjust it. And we saw that pay off. And I thought that was huge late in the game because North Carolina had some looks they couldn't finish. Yesterday was a little the same, but I looked yesterday, 11 points, 12 rebounds, which is as high on a year. In fact, there's not even another game that's close to that, and 3 blocked shots. So you're talking 12 blocked shots in the last 3 games. And SMU, you might look at the numbers and say, well, he had no points. He only shot 1 time. He had 3 rebounds. He played a bad game, okay? Well, he had 4 blocked shots, and there were some adjustments in there. Now, here's the thing. I'd like to see consistency because you notice when we talked about the lineup, who to play, we said, okay, Washington and Lubin, who plays better is who's going to get the majority time at the 5. Whoever Hubert Davis gets the feel for that's playing the best. Well, it needs to be, in my opinion, Jalen Washington because he's bigger and longer. It's good. I think Lubin will really help you in rebounding, getting position. I'm probably a little better at scoring, to be honest with you. But the thing
He's got a better touch in the lane.
Yeah. But the thing is, Jalen Washington is lengthy, whereas Lubin's bulkier, stronger looking, wider, stronger base. You've got long, lean Jalen Washington. They've got different builds. And you need that in today's game around the rim. Like I said, just when those guards get in there, you have to offer a place there where they're going to struggle getting baskets around the rim. It was huge against North Carolina State. It was huge against Notre Dame. So he doesn't have to go out and give you 20 points and 15 rebounds to do what he needs to do to help this team. That rim protection, the rebound, those things, blocking shots, that's the big issue. And 2 out of the last 3, blocking shots the last 3 games. But we need to see him consistently. If he would do it every game, get more consistent each game, then it's really a big help in North Carolina.
Stanford is going to be a big test for him because I think the leading scorer in the league right now who's, I don't know how much he's averaging, but he's a kid that's not just big and strong. He can step away. So that'll be a test for Jay Wash. I'm going to say something that's going to sound crazy, but in the last 3 games defensively, if you squint your eyes, he's reminded me a little bit of a poor man's Bryce Johnson because of his activity. And it's not just that he's long. He's 6'10" with a long wingspan. He's like 7'4", but he's bouncy. He's athletic, and he's reacting better because he's moving better. Now, Bryce was phenomenal at knocking stuff away. In fact, I remember he had 7 blocks against Providence in a second-round NCAA game when I was courtside, and one of the Providence players drove the lane, and Bryce smacked his stuff into the 5th row and was screaming at him, "No, you can't. You can't." It'll be interesting to see if Jay Wash gets to the point where he expects to knock stuff away and isn't doing it and kind of accruing the confidence that comes with it. I think that block shot of Jaden Taylor's with 1 second left looked like a play where he knew he was going to get it, and there was no question in his mind he was going to get it. And I think that's the first time I've seen that from him, and that's what I saw for a year and a half from Bryce Johnson defensively. It'll be interesting to see if he continues to, with his squinted eye, bear a similar resemblance defensively as Bryce did.
So you've got to remember this about Jalen Washington. He was a question mark coming in. The coaching staff, they had said publicly that, if they didn't really get a big-time 5, they had faith in him. If they didn't get a big-time 5 out of the portal, they had faith in him. But we know they were looking at guys. They were really going hard after Omarui, who transferred from Rutgers and ended up at Alabama. They were waiting on the big 7-footer from Creighton to hit the portal. They were looking at some guys, and it wasn't like that they wanted Washington not to make it. But he comes in, and between his senior season and coming into his junior year of senior year of high school to junior year of college, not 1 but 2 knee injuries.
Yeah,
playing behind Baycott, who really never came off the floor. So you're talking about a guy who really didn't play a lot, who was coming off, like I said, who had these knee injuries, and we know how devastating that could be. And nobody knew what they were really going to get. So he gets off to maybe a slow start. There's some issues there, but as the year goes, now maybe these last couple of games he's coming into his own. So I think it's natural that he just didn't come in and take off this year as a junior, because it's never been that way with him. It seems like he's been behind the 8 ball ever since he came out of high school, although he was highly recruited. So many unfortunate things have happened. He's had to fight for everything, and he's doing the same thing as junior year. So that's something I like about him. He hasn't had the silver spoon in his mouth. He's not had everything's just been there, and he's really not had to fight for stuff. This has had a guy that's had to scratch and claw his way into the North Carolina lineup and scratch and claw for everything he can get. So he's got that fight in him. And like you say, it builds that confidence that he's got. So you're hoping that, like I said, I want to see him be more consistent. But I think we all realize he's willing to fight for that. And we talk about confidence a lot. So he's had a lot of things go against him. So, and it wavers your confidence. But now we start to see the imprint he's putting on the game.
Well, we know that one of the reasons why, Hubert has a certain standard about certain aspects of the portal, and maybe that will change this coming spring, but they always knew that they had him. And in the summer, there was a strong belief that the guy we saw against NC State and Notre Dame was more the guy they thought they were going to have from the beginning this year. So they didn't feel like it was a massive, quote unquote, miss in the spring, because they were pretty comfortable that with Lubin coming in the way he played last year at Vandy, and then with projecting forward with Jay Wash, who was a super talented guy, very highly rated guy in high school before the knee injury, that they thought that they had something more than what they've seen until this past week. So if that light has gone on, and it's a trite phrase, but I'm going to use it anyway. If it has gone on, and you go back and think about what we talked about with Ian changing and Drake having settled in as a starter now, and then Seth's going to work his way back in and kind of figure out how he fits when he gets over the concussion hangover. RJ being more of a leader now and not having to feel like he has to do everything. And then Elliott appears to have gotten through the funk those 11 assists Saturday were gorgeous, and he should have had more, but some guys missed. Suddenly, the outlook on what this team could be is different. I know they're going against ACC teams, but I'm disregarding that. I'm thinking about them as individuals and then how that meshes collectively. It appears to me that more than any time this year, other than maybe leaving Memphis in an exhibition game, or even Kansas perhaps, that this team still has a chance to be pretty good. They're not a national championship team, but they have a chance to be pretty good, win a lot of games, and stick around for a while in March if these things continue in their current trend. And there's a lot of ifs. It's a lot of stuff that needs to happen. But we're actually seeing some signs that it could be happening, David.
Yeah, and I think right now, and I'm going to be honest with you, I think right now they are – I would, if you ask me what they are, I'd categorize them as a first weekend team in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah.
You know how that goes. You got to, it depends on your draw.
Yeah.
You know, you got a good one or a bad one, man, you could end up with the right two teams and find your way in the Elite Eight. You know how that works. So they're trying to move ahead. But like I said, they've not peaked. Hubert Davis has had to do so much maneuvering and with this team, and players have tried to they're making improvements. We know that they've certainly not peaked. And this is one of these deals when you're glad this is a 35-game season, because it may take every bit of it, because you're constantly, it's like a jigsaw puzzle. You're constantly trying to work it. But you said one player, and I want to mention it now because I don't want to leave this out. I was impressed with Elliot Cadeau yesterday, because he can do this. You know, he really he's such a great passer, and he's look at guys who the rim looks like it's big around as a barrel, and they've never seen a shot they couldn't make. Well, he's never seen a pass that he doesn't feel like he could make. So you look at yesterday, he had 2 straight turnovers on trying to make passes. Hubert takes him out. And we're talking a critical part of the game with about 5-6 minutes left to go, plays Trimble. So you've got Trimble from about the 5 to 6 minute mark down inside a minute. And then the biggest offensive possession, obviously, they put Cadeau back in, and he makes that pass over his head against the double team, and he hits Jalen Washington for the dunk, and they take the lead. So he doesn't pout. He doesn't sulk. They take him out in a huge part of the game. And if you watch him, he was on the bench. He was cheering. He wasn't down. And when he went back into the game, he was ready to go. And I think that's huge. He was mentally ready after going to the bench, because he made turnovers. Hubert pulled him. Yeah. And it wasn't a rotation deal. Hubert pulled him, and he came right back in and responded in the biggest way.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up Elliott, because he deserves some kudos too, because that funk he went through was a mixed bag of stuff. Those passes that he thinks he can complete were not being completed. Suddenly he wasn't shooting the ball from the perimeter. He was shooting the ball well from the perimeter the first couple of weeks of the season. That stopped. He wasn't getting to the rim. He was early fouls were starting to pick up again. And then he had that moment where he had that turnover late against Florida, and he's in tears coming off the court. He went through a funk, but I'll tell you, he made the defensive play at the end of the UCLA game, which I thought was phenomenal. He hit the shot and the free throw to beat Notre Dame. And I think he kind of got his head through the clouds. Like, he's peering through. He can see stuff in front of him now. And it's very possible that in a month from now, we could be going back to that stretch. And when we're talking about Ian's maturity, we're talking about Elliott's maturity too. And not everybody has the same exact pace that they follow in all aspects of life. And maybe Elliott long-term needed to go through some of that to suddenly become tougher, to suddenly become more mature, and to really become even more confident than previously. That pass he completed to Jay Wash last night at the end of the game, that was an Elliott Cadeau play that only Elliott Cadeau on that team can make. Nobody else can make that play. And I just think that's huge. And it shows to me that I'll say it for like the fourth time. The funk that he went through, he's climbing out of it. And he's going to be grateful for the funk down the road. As so many of us are in life, we go through tough times. It looks to me like Hubert has handled that well with him. The people who communicate to him on a regular basis, like a Marcus Page, has really been very strong in his ear and helped him along. I think RJ's helped him. And I think Elliott has done a lot of it on his own. I see a different personality in warmups now than I saw a couple weeks ago. I see someone who's got his eyes wide open and not his head down. He used to see his head down sometimes in warmups. Didn't seem like the guy that I even saw late last year, because his game grew late last year. He had that big game at Miami, and you're like, man, there's something there. This guy's really starting to come, but it didn't fully happen. So I think if Elliott, we continue to talk about all these parts, if Elliott clearly is through the funk, and that pass on top of a week ago, the 4-point play against Notre Dame, propels him, again, this team has a chance to be pretty good by the end of the year. And by the way, I agree with you. I think first weekend team, sticking around and winning some games in March means winning some in Charlotte, the ACC tournament, and then, winning a game in the NCAA tournament, or even two, depending on the draw. I think that's a high end right now for this team. But 2 weeks ago, they didn't look like an NCAA tournament team by any stretch, even after Louisville. We all thought that, man, this club, Jacob and I did a podcast, the next three, Notre Dame, SMU, and App State. What are the chances that they lose all three or win all three? And people thought there was a greater chance they would lose all three than win all three. Well, they won all three. And they won two in late game situations where they had to make plays. It wasn't just because the other team screwed up. They had to make winning plays, and then they blew the doors off of a pretty decent SMU team. So all these parts that we're talking about, these growths, these guys stepping forward, some of these bouts of maturity are all kind of converging at the same time right now. And because of that, they should have no trouble this week at home. Now, Wake on the road is going to be tough. BC at home won't be. We're going to know if all these things that we're talking about are truly real when they have that 3-game stretch at Pitt, at Duke, home against Pitt. Pitt's going to be a nightmare for this team to guard. But can they? How do they compete in those games? Does Duke blow the doors off them like they have everybody else? We'll have to wait and see. I think they're in better shape right now with that a few weeks down the road than they were even 12 days ago.
I agree with that. And it's just going to be the ability to play on the road, and not fall behind, not a term I use a lot, not get behind the 8 ball there. Like I said, there's still, even in Notre Dame, North Carolina State, 2 wins. But like I said, there's you watch it and you go, okay, there's still something not quite right. They need to be scoring more points. Neither one of these teams are an NCAA tournament team. They're both before the year's old. I mean, I don't know if they're even NIT teams or not. But they need to put the foot on the gas and separate themselves from this. So, and I think Clemson's another team too, because Shefflin is so physical inside. And I think Shefflin may be more of a matchup for Lubin and Washington because he's got that strong low base. But
and they go to Clemson. They have to play them down there, which is always tough.
Yeah. And here's the thing about Duke. Look at it, 2 games with Duke. And we'll see, because my first thing looking at Duke, besides them being good, is that I say, okay, Duke's just a big team, man. They've got, they got Cooper Flagg. They're playing out on the perimeter at 6'10". Malawatch is about 7'2". They've got all this size, and it's the worst thing. You're talking about Alabama and Auburn all over again, for North Carolina. And now, hopefully, with a freshman coming along, because who are the guys who can really match up and play with him? Well, it's guys like Ian Jackson. Those are those type of, when you talk about the best players in the country, the most talented players in the country, they got to have Ian. You throw him into that subject. But now, like we said, the new lineup that they have, they're playing bigger, and hopefully Jalen Washington, although he's going to be undersized when they play Duke, you still hope that this is a team that plays bigger, that plays longer, that plays tougher around the rim. So there's not a whole lot of games in the ACC where they're going to really be tested to that.
Yeah.
But Duke, Clemson, Pitt, that's three teams I can think of right off the bat.
I think Wake on the road, because of the degree of difficulty, they struggle there. It's a game circled by Wake. And, who's going to guard Hunter Salas? There's some guarding issues I could see in Winston-Salem, but those are kind of it. I don't think Virginia Tech or Miami or BC or Virginia, I don't think Syracuse. Syracuse has got a little bit of size, but they're a mess. I don't see those other teams, if Carolina plays as it did, even Saturday against State, where there were still a lot of warts, should win those games. It's going to come. We're going to know who they are based on at Wake, at Pitt, at Duke, at Clemson, then Pitt and Duke at home. Those 6 games.
And if you eliminate Clemson, Duke, and Pitt, here's the one landmine, is that a loss does you more bad than a win does you good.
Yep.
Because you're thinking about Notre Dame, and I was even thinking of it North Carolina State, like, man, you're taking a heavy hit if you lose these games because they're so far down to make.
Yep.
Like Ken Palms and all that. It's not only, you really don't get a quality win out of it, but you can get a bad loss. So, it goes back kind of like we've heard all these arguments in the football playoffs. You heard it with Indiana, with Notre Dame, with people like that. So you had people on one side, you said, okay, they've got a good record, but maybe they've not played anybody. And then you would have the teams that didn't get in. So you've got Alabama, you've got Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss, you've got South Carolina, those schools saying, okay, we lost 3 games, but look who we played. So if you're North Carolina, you've got kind of a mix. You've got, okay, we've got 2 good wins. We hope they stay good. But obviously we've got a lot of good losses too. So we've played that very tough schedule, played these things, and they really had to, because the ACC just doesn't offer that this year. I mean, we got to be honest with that. So now you get into this where you're like, okay, we've got about 4 quality wins in the ACC we could get. We let's see how we do in that, but we can't afford these bad losses against teams that just aren't a blip on the radar screen nationally.
Well, the committee will sit there and say, okay, who'd you lose to? And if their only losses are to really good teams in quad 1 games, and let's remember, they were right there at the end at Kansas. They were right there at the end with Michigan State, right there to the end with Florida. Those are games they could have won, and maybe the team right now would win 1, 2, or 3 of those games. They didn't. It's on the resume. But if you have a quad 3 or quad, like Dayton had a quad 4 loss the other night to UMass, that's huge. And it hurts Carolina. By the way, UCLA falling off a cliff is hurting Carolina. Dayton had a terrible week last week. They also lost George Washington. Carolina fans need to root for UCLA and Dayton big time. As much as they root for the Tar Heels, they need those to be quad 1 games. Another potential.
Let me say this too before we move on. If you look at football, so you've got Lane Kiffin saying, okay, we've played these, we need to get into the playoff. Well, the argument was not necessarily losing to LSU or that, but the question became all of a sudden, why didn't you beat Kentucky?
Exactly.
4-8. So if you're Alabama, and where I live at, you hear all this that they should have got in. Well, why didn't you lose? Why didn't you beat Vanderbilt? And why didn't you beat a bad Oklahoma team, which you only scored 3 points? So they had all these really tough losses that are just horrible. Yeah. That if you had an argument as a 3-team game win, a 3 loss team, I'll get out 3 loss team to get in, it got eliminated because you lost to some horrible teams. You can't do it.
Yeah, one other potentially dangerous game is at Florida State, which is kind of still in that range of potentially being a quad 1 game. I'm not sure how, but it is. The net is what it is. And by the way, the head of the NCAA selection committee this year, next year, is Bubba Cunningham, Carolina's AD, and he can't stand the net. He doesn't like it, but they don't want to change it, so there's not much he can do about that. And of course, they will discuss the Tar Heels when the head of the selection committee is sitting in another room, which is another dumb thing because who else knows the team better than him in that room? Doesn't make any sense. So anyway, I think that will be interesting. This team, the stuff that we're talking about, we've seen the last week. And I was pretty hard on them a week ago saying, it's not a good team because it wasn't a good team through Louisville. The stuff we've seen the last week, if it's real, these hiccup games won't occur.
Right.
So, and they're going to base whatever they are on what happens in basically the 2 games of Pitt, 2 games of Duke, at Wake, at Clemson. I think those are the 6. Because Wake's a borderline tournament type team, perhaps. They have some talent. We'll see if they can pick off a couple of W's and enhance themselves. But those are the games.
Yeah.
And it's weird to see.
I should have mentioned Wake. I think Wake will be a tough game there.
Yeah, Wake will be a tough game. There's a lot of matchup issues there. And the Demon Deacons play the Tar Heels usually very well over Winston-Salem. So, but that's 2 games from now. That's one other thing I want to throw out there very quickly. And we've gone long, but we haven't done this in a while. So what the hell? A couple of years ago, the 22 team that got to the title game and struggled for a while, they were sort of in this boat a little bit. They had that January stretch where they lost to Miami and Wake in back-to-back weeks by like 50 points combined. And then Dawson Garcia quit and all that kind of junk. And people thought, man, this thing's falling apart. And then they started to win some games. They beat bad BC at home by 5. They beat a bad Virginia Tech at home by 4. And I said at that time, look, they just need to win games. Winning games will build the confidence. It will it'll clear the clutter out of the mind. And I think that their last 4 games away from home have been a 2-point win over Notre Dame in Madison Square Garden, in which they had to make a defensive play at the end, and Elliot Cadeau did. The 1-point win at Notre Dame, in which Elliot Cadeau made the 4-point play. And then the game Saturday, in which Jalen Washington had the dunk and then the block shot to win a game. The loss in between there is Louisville, and it was a 13-1 run over the last 3.5 minutes by Louisville to win the game. So they were in position with 3.5 minutes to go to win that game. But they didn't do it. They didn't find a way to do it. Louisville's better than the last 2 clubs they've played. But I do think it's important that when you win, you could stack wins, and it really can change a disposition for a team. And if so much of it is up here, when you declutter up here, David, that means more of your natural gifts can come out and play freely. And some of the guys on this team are much, much better when the junk is gone. And we saw that from Elliott Saturday. So just win. Carolina fans, don't worry too much about margins. I agree with you this week. They need to win fairly big. I don't think they need to beat both teams by 20, but they don't need to beat both teams by 4 either. I think if they're in that 10 to 15 range, you can look at them and say, okay, those are wins. They're stacking wins. They're getting W's. They're feeling better about themselves. Are they growing at the same time? We can only know that by watching them play. But right now, just win.
Yeah, and that's the Bill, like you said, it builds confidence. Knowing how to win skill.
Yep.
And you've heard coaches say that. You've heard commentators, but it is. It is because players and coaches can go through their whole lives and just really struggle and winning big games and you've seen it from middle school on up, that why can't this guy or this girl, when it comes down to it, why can't they make the big plays and win games? Some people just have the knack for that.
Yeah.
And so that's a huge thing. But I'll say this too. It's a marathon. It's a marathon. One reason you hear, if you ever noticed, when you have coaches like on ESPN, and I'm talking about retired coaches, so Saban's on a set, Urban Meyer's on a set, Greenberg's on a set, and all these guys who used to coach, okay? And that's what they do. They're very, very, very tentative to criticize coaches. And there's obviously, they've been there. They've received that criticism. They don't want to do that. But another thing is, I think they all realize and know how long the season is and the importance of just going in and every day and working and coaching your team and trying to make improvements, trying to build more strengths, trying to cut back and make less weaknesses. They understand the importance of that, and it takes time. So I go back, you go back to that Baylor game, the year North Carolina made the run.
Yeah.
And how that could have gone so easily the other direction, and you've put out the first weekend, and it doesn't give Hubert Davis then, when people look at what kind of job he's doing and all that stuff, the luxury is saying, well, he went to a national championship game. It could have been like they got eliminated the first weekend. They didn't go to the NCAA tournament. His second year, yeah, they did go to the Sweet 16 last year. There's just so much cachet you get by going, obviously, to the Final Four and championship game. So I look at these teams and the way sports works, and there's so much of that where you find a way to win an improbable game, or you just – everything's so close. It's why we love March Madness, because it's like every game, you're like, how can I watch? I'm watching 6 games at once, and they're all one possession. I'm on overload here. So that's what you got. It can happen with North Carolina. Once you get season, it's a new season, and everything changes, and everything just gets tighter and tighter and tighter. So like you said, they're making the improvements, the adjustment, and this is Hubert's probably had to pull out more than he's ever had. I saw Kirby Smart say after, they lost to Notre Dame, he said, we've had more things this year that we've had to work through than we've ever had. They kicked players off the team. They had major injuries. Their quarterback got hurt. They had new coordinators. We had just it was like every week we were trying to pull something, we're just trying to take care of things, of difficulties, of issues. So there's a lot of teams that face that. So just they're going to keep working. They're going to keep working. And like you said, you got to let this thing play out and not panic, and then see where you're at in March.
And it's always good to remember.
Sport. That's one thing every high school coach in America will tell you. It's a tournament sport.
And as a coach, you know this a hell of a lot more than I do. But coaches say it all the time. It is hard to win. It's hard to win games, especially when you get into a league like the ACC. As down as it is, there's still ACC players on other rosters.
Yeah.
Tay Davis and Marcus Burton. Braden Shrewsbury, Tay Davis, Marcus Burton from Notre Dame. Every team in America would take all 3 of those guys. They're good enough to win some games. NC State's got some dudes. So it's hard to win. And it's hard to win in someone else's building. And it's also hard to win when you don't have your full confidence that you might eventually have. That's another thing that I find very fascinating. So Carolina's won a couple of these games, and they're still searching to cement their confidence across the board. That's a very, very positive thing, and it's also the kind of thing that will get you that confidence moving forward. So it's hard to win games. It's a tournament sport, like you said, and I think covering college basketball, a team like this, in a lot of ways, is more interesting and more fun than a club that starts the year number 1 and just races through the season, because I like to watch moving parts. Now, the season's had a lot of moving parts, and I think there's still a few more to occur.
And it's a teeter-totter here. When you're walking a barbed wire fence, you can fall off either direction. So that's what makes it, and it's stressful because they were so close to losing the Notre Dame game. They were so close to lose. It was a miracle, really, that they didn't. And then it was so close to losing yesterday. So it can go the wrong direction. Yep. That's why we're saying that's what's going to make it very interesting. And like I said, it makes it stressful. It could go either way. Yep. Now, yesterday, I don't figure into it, but there was 4 games really that I thought about that 2 they should have lost that they won, 2 that they won that they should have lost. They probably should have lost Notre Dame. They should have beat Louisville as well. It was right.
Burton should have converted.
You could have switched those out very easily. So there's going to be those games, those very close games, and you're like, man, we lost, and there's no way we should have lost that game. How did we win that game? Well, we got a lot of those left. We got several weeks of it. It'll be fun.
It is going to be fun, and that's one of the things I love about doing this, because I don't like cookie cutter stuff. I like to be challenged in what I do, and this basketball team has been a challenge. There's no doubt about that. David, it's about time that we finally, it's been a couple of months since you and I have done one of these, but I think now that my football stuff is starting to lighten up a little bit, that we'll have more time to do these. I'll be able to.
Your football, you've got the job everybody in the world wants right now. And I can't wait. I can't wait till Belichick blows you off in the press conference. I'm just waiting.
I've been blown off before. I had a legend try to get me fired at Fox Sports, so I'm okay. I'm a big boy and I'm still standing, so I'll be fine. I'm actually looking forward to it. It'll be very interesting to see if the access is a little different because it's a college program. He says that being away for a year, being around a college program, he understands there's a different degree of passion. So maybe he'll give us more access. I just wish they would hire a media relations person so I'd have a direct contact to the program instead of going through the side door, about 14 different side doors, which is what I've been forced to do so far. But we've been all right. We've done pretty well, all things considered.
Well, I think if you're a North Carolina fan, it's an exciting time all the way around.
It is. I mean, if the sleeping giant's ever going to awaken, maybe it will happen now. And if it doesn't happen now, maybe it never will. David Sisk, longtime college, AAU, high school coach, and of course, THI college basketball expert, analyst, and your film reviews. If you were not a subscriber to THI for just $8.33 a month, David's film reviews alone are worth it. Just go look on our boards. David, every time we post, people are saying, boy, this is worth the price of admission alone. So maybe I shouldn't tell you that. I'll have to throw you some more coins. But that's if we get a couple more sponsors, then I can throw David some more coins because he deserves it. And certainly so does everybody else on our staff. For David Sisk, I'm AJ. We appreciate you guys hanging out with us for an hour and 30 minutes. Appreciate it. Thank you.